Ground control to Major Tom.
said to me, is the room full?
No.
Well,
Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 School Board Regular Meeting. The time is now 6 o'clock. The school board would like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Miss Marati.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we please get the roll call?
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Colonel Alvarado is expected and Colonel Siri is excused. Mr. Sampson is expected. Mrs. Matheson?
here.
Mr. Doran?
Here.
Mrs. Sanderson?
Here.
Miss Marati?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Luke?
Here.
The board has a quorum.
Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. Core value, center everything we do on the student and student learning. Consent agenda items marked with an asterisk are considered routine items not requiring public discussion by the school board. Unless removed from the consent agenda, asterisk items will be automatically approved when the agenda is adopted. Questions concerning these items should be directed to the administration before the meeting. If the superintendent or a member of the public wishes to have an item removed from the consent agenda, the request must be made to a board member anytime prior to the start of the meeting. The board member has the discretion to accept or deny the request. Only a board member may remove an item from the consent agenda. If an item is removed from the consent agenda, it shall be considered separately as the last item of new business. Asterisk items will then be adopted by one single motion. Can I get a motion, please?
Move to adopt the agenda with consent items.
Second.
Can we get the vote, please?
Miss Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Doran?
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson?
Yes.
Miss Marati?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Luke?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Can we please get the presentation on agenda items?
Move to accept the award in the amount of $120,065.57 for the Title I Part D, Subpart 2 Neglect and Delinquent Competitive Grant from the United States Department of Education through the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development per fiscal note 2023-03. Move to accept the award in the amount of $396,484 for the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Improvement Act of 2006 grant from the United States Department of Education through the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development per fiscal note 2023-02. Move to award IFB 23-F007 playground installation for Anderson Crawford Elementary School to Trust Construction Incorporated for an award of $152,340. Move to accept Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School request to fundraise approximately $3,000 for hosting the Serve-a-thon for the school's volleyball program. Move to approve Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School request to fundraise approximately $2,500 by hosting the donated date, donations only, no service provided, for the school's wrestling program. Move to approve Lathrop High School's request to fundraise approximately $1,000 by hosting the future Malamute Camp and cupcake sales during games for the school's 2022-23 cheer travel expenses. Move to approve Lathrop High School's request to fundraise approximately $1,000 by hosting the future Malamute Camp cupcake sales during the game for the cheer travel expenses. Move to approve North Pole Elementary School's request to fundraise approximately $1,500 by hosting the Scholastic Book Fair on October 24th through November 4th, 2022, to raise funds to purchase books for their library. Move to approve North Pole High School's request to fundraise approximately $9,000 by hosting a pick-a-date calendar sponsorship for the school's cheer travel and supplies expenses. Move to approve Pearl Creek Elementary School's request to fundraise approximately $3,500 by hosting the Scholastic Book Fair on October 24th through November 4th, 2022, to raise funds to purchase books and supplies for their library. Move to approve Tanana Middle School's request to fundraise approximately $1,000 or more by hosting an orchestra and band choir rockathon to raise funds for the new music supplies, new instruments, and repairs. And move to approve Wood River Elementary School's request to fundraise approximately $2,000 by hosting the Scholastic Book Fair on October 31st through November 4th, 2022, to raise funds for library needs and community outreach. Move to approve West Valley's High School's request to send cross-country runners and one chaperone to Ontario, California, October 20th through 23rd, 2022, to compete in the Mount Sac cross-country race at no cost to the district. And if any local or state federal travel or health warnings are issued, the students will not travel. Move to approve West Valley School's request for its music department to raise approximately $160,000 to send approximately 30 students and chaperones to Disney World in Orlando, Florida on March 11th through 19th, 2023, to engage and work with other music organizations outside of Alaska at no cost to the district. And if any local or state federal travel or health warnings are issued, the students will not travel. And move to approve Lathrop High School's request for its Junior ROTC program to raise approximately $15,000 to send junior ROTC candidates and instructors to Camp Perry, Ohio on March 23rd through 25th, 2023 for air rifle competition at no cost to the district. And if any local or state federal travel or health warnings are issued, students will not travel. Move to accept the donation of $1,500 from VFW Post 30 to Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School to support the school's football team travel expenses. Move to accept donations of $2,000 from EOSC Welfare to Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School to support the school's football team and travel expense. Move to accept donations of $6,000 from Effie Cochran Charter School nonprofit to Effie Cochran Charter School to support the school's boys basketball expenses. Move to accept a donation of $1,000 from Rosa's Cleaning Service, LLC, to Lathrop High School to support the school's football team. Move to accept a donation of $1,200 from FBX Central Labor Gaming Account to North Pole High School to support the school's cheer team travel, uniforms, and supply expenses. Move to accept the donation of a fridge and beverage cooler valued at $1,500 from Lowe's Fairbanks to Pearl Creek Elementary to replace the broken one in its staff lounge. Move to accept the donation of $4,500 from the Northern Area Aquatics to West Valley High School to support the school's 2022-2023 swim team season. And move to accept the monthly management reports from the month end July and August 2022. Move to approve the personnel action report for the period 8/26 through 9/7/2022. Move to acknowledge the personnel information report period 8/25 through 9/7/2022. Move to acknowledge the budget transfer for the period of July 7th through August 31st, 2022 is provided. And move to acknowledge the board's coming events and meeting announcements.
Thank you, Mrs. Moline. Next, we have public comments on reports and non-agenda item. Public comments on reports and non-agenda items, including public comments, input, ideas, and suggestions are welcome on salaries, benefits, and any other contractual items regarding the ESSA and FEA negotiations. Core value, engage with students, families, staff, and community support student success. Public comments on reports and non-agenda items are limited to 2 minutes per person for a maximum of 1 hour. People who have signed up in advance through the school board office to testify in person or by Zoom will be called upon first, and if time remains, anyone else who is in person will be invited to testify until the 1 hour time limit has been reached. A person testifying shall state their name, spell their last name, and their city of residence for the record. Board members may ask questions for clarification. Although there is time at the end of each meeting for school board and chief school administrator comments, some concerns may not be able to be addressed immediately, as additional information may need to be gathered. Mrs. Richardson, do we have? Okay. First on our list is Sandy Ryan. If you will state your name, spell your last name, give us your city of residence, and you will have 2 minutes to testify.
Can you hear me?
I could barely hear you.
Hey, Jennifer, I have some car trouble, so I'm hoping you can hear me. Is
Yes.
that better?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Sandy Ryan, R-Y-A-N, and I'm a resident of Fairbanks. And thank you guys for hearing me tonight. I had actually asked to maybe have myself removed. My husband's out of town, and my car decided not to start. And now the fan is running, and I can't turn it off. So there's a few things on my mind, but I wanted to sort of give you a state of FEA. I try to do that once a year, and I think with COVID, sometimes we miss that. FEA is trying its best to get back on its professional development foot. We'll be starting Jumpstart in just a few weeks. We are working on military grant outreach that we're really, really excited about. And also we're looking at restorative practices classes bringing those back to our association. And so we appreciate the work that we can do for our members, regardless if they are a teacher, a counselor, librarian, therapist, or a psychologist. We try to offer things that are beneficial to help them with their craft. And so that's just one of the few things that FEA does give back to its members as well as the community as a whole. There's been a couple of years since we've seen those, and probably a little bit of time since I've been able to report on those. And I'm very excited that we're beginning to see that little bit of normalcy coming back into our lives. As you know, we're still working without a contract, and we're hoping that we make some progress there shortly, that we can begin to see some ground being cleared in between the two teams and some agreements being met. And so that's kind of my quick report. I'm sorry that it's fast, and I'm sorry I gave you a piece of my life with the car trouble. I just thought it was fascinating. My husband leaves town and the car breaks. It's jealous or something. I don't know. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moran, for your testimony this evening. We had no testimony sign up from the back. Is there anyone in the room that would like to testify? If you'll come up, state your name, spell your last name, and your area of residence, and you'll have 2 minutes to testify.
As it's on, there we
There we
go.
go.
Mics are not my friend. My name is Brandy Hardy, Harty, and I am a resident of Fairbanks. This is a little non-traditional, but I was in a forum this Monday, and there was a comment from our vice president that says, do participants realize that the charter schools are not school district schools? Some candidates misrepresent their students as public school students when they are not. And seeing as my children attend a charter school and I'm a charter school mom, I'm really confused. I thought my children attended a public school. I believed charter schools were a vital part of our public school system. And I would just like the board to clarify what exactly is a district and public school, since it is a board member making those comments. That's all. Shall I go?
Thank you so much for your testimony. Any further testimonies from the audience? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. We have no Borough Assembly report this evening. President report. Goal and objective is to ensure students, staff, families, and the community are informed, connected, and engaged with the district. For the report for this evening, I wanted to just update the community on the super search information that we went through last night at our work session. We went through the 7 proposals that were given to the board for possible companies that would like to assist us within our search. We have them narrowed down to 4 companies that we are created an ad hoc committee that will be working diligently over this next week and a half to come up with a suggestion on which company to go with. On October 4th, during that regular board meeting, we will have our vote on which company we will utilize to help us with the superintendent search. We realize that that is one of the greatest responsibilities that we as a board hold, is to ensure that we have the best candidate we have that we can attract to our district as our next superintendent. We are grateful for Mrs. Moline and her ability and her time, effort, and energy here within our district to continue on with leadership, and we are grateful for that time that she's going to have as we go on with this search. So I just wanted to ensure that our community understood that on October 4th, we will be making a determination on which company we will utilize for the superintendent search. And that is kind of the biggest responsibility that we have currently as a board, so that once November comes, the board with the new board members can focus on that responsibility before budget season really hits and takes up a lot of time. So that concludes my report. Yes, Mr. Doran.
Thank you, Mrs. Luke, for for that update and reminder for our staff and community. Just in line with that, it's crossed my mind that October 17th is open right now for a possible work session, and it might be worth considering having one either on the superintendent search once we've have an organization helping us move forward, or on maybe some preliminary committee work that we've already started the conversation on, but that might be a good date. So just putting that out there. The other thing that I asked maybe for your consideration, and with the CSA, Smaline, a number of us on the board were able to attend the AASB Fall Academy, and I'll talk about that during comments later, but just put in the hopper consideration of how we might support board members to attend their annual conference, especially after we have the reorganization, the elections and the reorganization of the board, ways that we can support members to attend that. So
That could definitely be discussed during your ending comments. Thank you. Chief School Administrator report. Goals and objectives: ensure students, staff, families, and community are informed, connected, and engaged with the district. Chief School Administrator Ms. Moline will provide her report. Mrs. Moline.
Thank you, President Luke. I'd like to just start my report tonight by letting everyone know that the Budget Committee is recruiting for community members and parents at this time. So if you're interested in serving on the Budget Committee, you can contact us at the district and start that process to join our Budget Committee. Next, I'd like to just start with the topic of enrollment. Our enrollment numbers are remaining right about 12,700 as we head into the October count. And like I'd mentioned earlier, it's that October count that we receive our funding from. So our numbers are staying strong as we head into that time. Next topic I'd like to cover is staffing. Our classrooms are all covered by adults in leading the student learning. So we are able to cover all of our classrooms. We continue to fill our added teaching positions that we need as a result of our increased enrollment. We currently have 2 of our ELP teachers who were reassigned to classrooms at the beginning of the year. One of those is likely to return to her ELP program position next week. That will leave only 1 remaining reassigned teacher in the district at this time. We are continuing to recruit for those traditionally difficult positions, including those special education positions that are generally more difficult to fill. We continue to recruit for subs. We were able to onboard a good number of new subs this summer, so we have a greater pool, but just by the nature of substitute teaching, we can only fill those sub requests as people pick up the jobs. So while we have a greater pool, that increases the chances of people picking up those sub jobs, but it's entirely depending on people going in and signing up for those jobs. With the increase in enrollment, we might expect larger class sizes. However, district-wide, 73% of our classes are at or below PTR. That leaves about 27 above PTR. Some are over by just 1, and some are over by more. So for secondary schools, we're finding those larger class sizes in the core classes, in those required classes. Those tend to be a little larger in size. And the challenge with that is just the basic space challenge, finding enough space in a classroom for those larger classes. But I have to say that our building leaders and principals have been doing a phenomenal job of problem solving and figuring out ways to make those class sizes work. In the elementary school, it's a little easier to manage class sizes because you possibly have 3 different classes in a grade level that you can distribute the students out across, or you can create a multi-grade class. But in some situations, there's just a lot of students in one grade, and that does result in some larger classes. That's not real prevalent across the district, but it does happen. So next I want to talk about our transportation, give it a brief transportation update, and I want to start the transportation update with the van plan, where we are with that. We've been working to provide a safe supplemental option, given the fact that we don't have enough drivers to staff all of our busing routes. We've had to work through a few safety and liability concerns with borough risk and deed. We've done that. And, we understand that minivans aren't school buses and they're not ever going to be a school bus. And time and again, school buses have been proven to be the safest way to transport kids. But in the event that we don't have buses, using these safer passenger type vans is an alternative that will meet or exceed the safety expectations that we need to supplement our transportation system. And we're using them in primarily two ways. The first one is to provide the required transportations for students experiencing homelessness or those in foster care. So we are required as a district to make sure that those students that are experiencing homelessness or in foster care attend their school of origin. So regardless of where they're living in the district, it's our responsibility to transport them to their school of origin. So that's one of the ways that we're going to use our vans, is to make it a little more efficient how we transport those students to their schools of origin. And the second priority in how we're going to use our vans is to provide transportation to low-density areas where bus service has been removed. Then this is generally in those further out areas where we've traditionally provided transportation services, but bus stops have been moved a considerable way further from the families and closer to the schools. For instance, areas back in the Haystack area where there's just a few students that need transportation. So a few other things to note about our transportation update and where we are with getting more routes in place. Right now, we're hiring drivers, but we're also losing drivers. We've hired 14 drivers since August 1st, and we've lost 13. So that's a net gain of 1. We have 76 drivers with 68 routes. And so far, we've been able to cover all of our routes. A couple of times it's been a little, we've been stretched a little thin, especially right around the Labor Day holiday when there's a higher call-out rate. There are 4 drivers in behind-the-wheel training right now. We have 23 driver applicants that are either in pre-enrollment screening or in a classroom training at this time. Well, that's a good number. We don't anticipate that all 23 will make it through the entire process. Some were screened out last week because of background checks, drug screening, or no contact information. So that's kind of where we are with our transportation folks. And then finally, I want to talk just a little bit about our, one more thing on the transportation. We were able to move the routes around a little bit to take care of some of the overcrowding that was happening on our buses, especially at Fort Wainwright. So we've moved routes around and reorganized the existing routes to help alleviate some of that those crowded buses, but we have not added any. If we can get a good number of those applicants that are in the pool right now through the training process, we're hoping to be able to restore some of our routes. So finally, I want to talk just a little bit about our strategic goal of equity and inclusion, which is our second strategic goal in our strategic plan. As I mentioned in my last report, that we're looking at addressing this particular goal in a department-by-department way, because what we've realized is that equity and inclusion looks different in each department. So our district has been honored for our work in the area of inclusion in the special education department. North Pole High School has been chosen as the Special Olympics Unified Champions School by Special Olympics of Alaska for their efforts to provide inclusive sports and activities for students with and without disabilities. So congratulations to North Pole High School for that honor. And following my report, I am leaving to Anchorage to receive on behalf of the district the School Program Partner of the Year Award from Special Olympics of Alaska. In the announcement of the award, they commented, even though activities with school programs were mostly virtual last school year, the Fairbanks School District still showed up in many ways. The Special Education Administration participated in the Polar Plunge by raising money and making a short video of them taking the plunge virtually. The Fairbanks North Star Borough School District is making great strides in fostering more inclusive environments in their school communities. So I'm very proud of the efforts on with our special education department and the honors that they've received in their efforts. So with that, if it's okay with the board president, I'd like to address the concern about charter schools students being district students.
Yes, Ms. Milling.
So as a point of clarity, charter school students that attend school in our charter schools are school district students. They're a part of the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District. They are a part of a charter school, and the way that happens is a group comes to this board and says that they would like to enter into a charter agreement with the district on doing education this way. So whatever their charter is lined out is the way that they present to this board how they want to provide an education for the students in this district. So this board gets to decide if they approve the charter or not approve the charter. And if the charter is approved, then we enter into an agreement with the charter school that they're going to follow their model and how they present education to the students in our district. So those students that are enrolled in the charter school are truly a part of our school district through a partnership with charter schools. So that's a little bit how that works. And that in the charter that the folks would bring to the school, they have, how they're going to provide special education services, how they're going to, they have to have a budget, and all of those things, just like any school does. So that's a little bit of like a 30-second how charter school students are a part of our school district.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you, Ms. Moline, for all the detail actually you gave us. That was very, very helpful. Just one clarification that with our enrollment up, I think you mentioned under staffing that we're continuing to look to add positions in to help to cover those. I know we're challenged with qualified people to hire, but that's an ongoing process. And if those classes can stay large or continue to stay large, if we have the staffing, we may be able to address those large class sizes down the line. Is that correct?
Well, to some extent, possibly, but because we staff to PTR, if a building's PTR average is at where it should be, then their staffing would be considered fully staffed. If they're over, like if they're not meeting the average PTR, but that means that some classes within that school may have over PTR, but then some would have under. So just depending on what the average school PTR is, that's how they're staffed. And if they meet that average and they've got all the staff to hold that average PTR, then they would be considered fully staffed.
Okay, thank you. And I know at secondary, it's particularly challenging because of their whole scheduling thing, but so thank you. The other thing I just kind of toss out because it's on my mind, and you've mentioned it before, the Alaska Reads Act, and you've mentioned from the beginning of this year, our focus this year being on literacy, and I know that's one of your fortes. And through President Luke, if it might be something of interest for you to do and for the board to hear at some point, maybe a presentation under reports about literacy, what we're doing in our district. We're doing a lot of stuff and have been doing it for decades and decades and decades, but also some of the renewed considerations and interest for that, and maybe supports going ahead. So no rush on it, but I'm just thinking that that might be helpful if the board was interested, and for the community, just to get a little broader view that this is not something new, but it's building on our strengths and moving ahead. And appreciate your making that one of the highlights for this year. So thank you.
Yeah, I would love to give the board an update on what we're doing district-wide and our focus. We've got a lot of really good things happening. We're laying out our plan and laying the foundation, and we will definitely get that on the books. And look forward to you hearing from Assistant Superintendent LaPlante and Executive Director Chain Beam, as we have kind of a little group that we're working on building plans out. So definitely be hearing from us about that in the near future.
Ms. Marati?
Thank you. I will agree that was a great report and very appreciated. And I would also love a report on literacy, especially considering your expertise in that field. My question, so I was approached a few times about the deed approval process of the van plan. And I know that you emailed us about it, but I guess I don't quite understand how that rolled out and if we have approval to do this through deed or not. And if you could clear up that confusion, that would be much appreciated.
Sure. We, Ryan Hinton and I met with, had a lengthy conversation with Department of Education about this plan. We went over their concerns, and my primary question to them was, is it against the law for us to do what we want to do? And they said in multiple times across the conversation that no, there's nothing illegal, nothing that would prohibit you from doing this. What they did say is that they had safety concerns, and their safety concerns kind of coalesced around the state's ability to inspect those vehicles, because there's no mechanism right now to for the state to inspect these vehicles. On our part, what we know is that Durham does regular safety maintenance checks on these vehicles in the other places that they're implementing this plan, and that they will do that as a part of their practice, that there will be regular safety checks. So while they're not state inspectors that inspect these vehicles, they will undergo a regular inspection, probably more so than any passenger vehicle on the road right now. So that was one of their concerns. We talked through that, and they understood and thought that would be okay. They still had, from the state lens, wouldn't be able to have direct oversight of that. Then there was a concern about federal oversight, that the transportation is a part of federal funding, and we talked to them about other places in the country that are doing this. Illinois, Washington State has a big van program going on in their state. California, a couple of other states have, and those are just the ones that Durham operates, this kind of a student transportation program. So after we talked to them about those states, they were like, well, okay, it's happening in other places. So we did talk about it, and they said that they don't recommend it, but there's nothing that prohibits us from doing it, and it's a local decision. So it would be up to us to make the decision if we want to do that or not. They're not recommending it, but they say there's nothing that would keep us from doing it.
Thank you. I think I better understand it. So just to make sure I'm on the right page, deed does, and the federal oversight, they don't recommend it, they don't approve, but there's nothing that they can't stop us from doing it. So we're doing it anyways.
Right. There's nothing that in the law that prohibits us from doing it. And they reiterated several times that it is a local decision. So if we want to do that, then it's our decision.
Does the state inspect buses?
There is a state bus inspection process that they go through.
Okay. And deed said that they won't approve because they can't inspect the vans like they do inspect the buses.
That was one of their concerns, yeah. They don't have a mechanism. Part of the situation that we're in now is that we're the first ones in the state that are actually moving forward with this and getting like, no, we really want to do this. And we talked quite a bit with them. And I said our job is to educate kids. And a part of that is getting them to school in a safe way. And given that we're using our vans to help support our students experiencing homelessness and foster care, this is something we have to do. That's required by us to transport these kids. And we're trying to find a safe and efficient way to do that. And they said, I understand it. We just don't have any context for it. So I think that's a lot of what we're facing, is that there's no context within the state. They don't inspect passenger vehicles. They've never had anyone do this before, so they don't have a context or parameters to operate under. So I think that's some of what we're looking at here. But at the same time, they acknowledge that there's no legal reason that would prohibit us from doing this. And as far as us covering safety issues, we're doing as much as we can to make sure the vehicles are safe. They have, they'll have trained drivers behind the wheel. If we don't do something like this, what we're doing at this point to make sure we're meeting our requirements for those students that are experiencing homelessness and students in foster care is that one of the options that we have is to enter into an agreement with taxi services to provide taxi service for these students. And so the taxi goes and pulls into the driveway just like our vans would. But what we don't have in that situation is we don't have inspections on those taxis on a regular basis. And while there is a process for taxi drivers to go through, we don't have like direct oversight over them. We do have an MOU with the taxi company that has a pretty stringent outline to how that's supposed to work. But comparing safety options, our van plan would be way more safe than putting kids into a vehicle that's a taxi that we have no way of inspecting or making sure that it's maintaining. So in some ways, it's safer than what we're doing right now to fulfill our obligations to those students.
Ms. Sanderson and then Mr. Doran.
Thank you, Ms. Moline, for your report. I just wanted to back up to the drivers that are being trained. So the understanding is they had 14 in training and we gained 1. So are the trainees not completing their training and they're taking advantage of the Durham helping them get their CDL and the bonus, or is that not a part of it? How is that tied in? If you could explain that for me.
Yeah, sure. So what is happening is that they don't make it all the way through the program to licensure. So somewhere along the way, they either don't pass a background check or a drug test, or they choose not to complete the program. And depending on the individual, how far they get down that road is up to them. Some of them could get into it and decide, you know what, this isn't what I want to do. And that happens too.
And just to follow up on the our van plan. So the Department of Transportation, Public Safety, has the commercial vehicle inspectors. Have we approached them or have any communications if they could play any role in this inspecting our passenger vans?
I don't know that we've had any conversations with public transportation because I'm not sure it would fall under their jurisdiction either, because it's not like MCA or a delivery vehicle.
It's not considered a commercial vehicle of a certain weight. And so the CMV would have to go ahead and do that. That's what they're qualified for. But typically, I just recall when I was in the tourism industry, there were certain services, service A, B, and C, that they would do on regular routine basis, depending on the mileage of the vehicle. And there would be different items within each of those services.
Yeah, having been married to a commercial vehicle instructor, so I was just curious, just that hookup. Thank you for your report, Ms. Moline.
Mr. Dorn and then Ms. Matheson.
I just want to say that I really appreciate the detail that you and your team have gone through in looking at the van opportunities. And I know you've worked with, checking out the legalities, the risks, liabilities, those types of things. And willing to push the envelope a little bit or raise the questions because it's for the betterment of students, whether they are in the homeless or foster care or whether they're in those pockets that we would normally have bus service for, but we don't now, and we can make a big difference for families and consistency for students to get to school on a regular basis. And I was really pleased when you mentioned that Durham actually has vans operating in a number of different states. So in working with our contractor, that we have that opportunity where they have experience, knowledge. Certainly they're concerned about liabilities and everything else, so they'll be working very hard to make sure that they meet all the safety pieces. And with brand new vans and all the safety features that are on those right now make a big difference for kids. So I'm very glad as a district we are raising those questions, and it's very definitely for the benefit of students themselves. But it's been done in a very thoughtful manner, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Matheson?
Just for the record, I wanted to know what would be our cost savings for vans versus the taxis?
I'm not sure that I have that number right now. Mr. DeGraw, can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, good question, Ms. Matheson. We're still working through numbers. There wouldn't necessarily be savings to be had. It would literally boil down to, as Mr. Doran just referenced, we'd be expanding service to be able to help out more students in our school district. As opposed to if we don't implement the van plan, we're limited by those 68 routes. Implementing vans, we're able to benefit students experiencing homelessness, foster students, and those far-reaching students that live in the outlying areas. So really widening the net and providing more service to our school district, to our community and families.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moline. And thank you for going down to Anchorage to receive the award with the Special Olympics.
One of my favorite parts of the job.
Next, we have our first action item, unfinished business. Policy 233, School Board Officers and Their Duties, Treasurer, second reading. Goal and objective: ensure students, staff, families, and the community are informed, connected, and engaged with the district. Proposed revisions to Policy 233 move the audit committee to the responsibility of the treasurer. The policy is now before the board for second reading. Before we move further, we don't have any testimony that signed up beforehand. Is there anyone?
Do you want a motion?
Thank you so much, Mr. Doran. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve second reading, public hearing, and adoption of policy 233, school board officers and their duties.
Second.
Now that it's been moved and seconded, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify? Seeing none, public testimony is now closed. And for the record, this is the policy that is, as I stated before, just moving the audit committee to the responsibility of the treasurer. Are there any other thoughts or comments from the board? Mr. Doran.
Just want to express my appreciation for this clarification coming forward, and really it has been the treasurer who has sat on this committee, which is really a borough committee. So I think this is a good move for us to do, and as I said, appreciated having come forward to this to help clarify this.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, could we please get the vote?
Ms. Marati,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Sampson,
Yes.
Mrs. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Luke,
Yes,
motion carried.
thank you. Next, action item, new business. Resolution 2023-08, creating comprehensive support for families and students to navigate college and career training opportunities. Core value, maintain high expectations and educational opportunities to inspire high achievement. This resolution is now before the board. Can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve Resolution 2023-08, creating comprehensive support for families and students to navigate college and career training opportunities.
Second.
Thank you. There was no pre-signed up testimony for this item. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify on this particular item? Seeing none, public testimony is now closed. Ms. Marati, would you mind reading the resolution, please?
I would love to. Fairbanks North Star Borough Board of Education, Resolution 2023-08, creating comprehensive support for families and students to navigate college and career training opportunities. Whereas Alaska's workforce needs are growing, but many recent high school graduates are not pursuing the post-secondary education needed to be prepared to fill job openings and important community roles. And whereas research shows that helping students understand their motivation and passion can help youth prepare for and engage in the workforce. And whereas pilot programs in Alaska that provide personal navigation support with dedicated, well-trained, and supported career guides have demonstrated a significant increase in the percentage of high school graduates who pursued some type of degree, certification, or military training, and participants in these pilot programs in Alaska completed the FAFSA at rates that, if applied statewide, could grant Alaskan students access to an additional $15 million or more in federal aid each year. And whereas the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District's strategic plan emphasizes the need to provide all students with options to meet their needs to achieve success, and whereas the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District is committed to creating a global workforce for economic vitality, student success, and an educational environment that integrates core academics with real-world relevance. And whereas Alaska's best opportunity to meet the workforce needs of tomorrow is to help Alaskan students connect with the post-secondary opportunities they need to be ready. And now, therefore, be it resolved, the Fairbanks North Star Borough Board of Education renews its commitment and calls upon the state of Alaska to provide comprehensive family and student-centered navigation supports to help all students access college and career training opportunities that will help meet the state's current and future workforce needs.
Thank you. And would you like to speak to this resolution, please?
I'd love to. Mr. Doran, Ms. Smith, and I, and Ms. Anderson and I attended AASB's Fall Boardsmanship Academy, and we talked in depth about the need for workforce development. And I heard recently someone say that the district is the bedrock of workforce development. We start in our schools and prepare students for post-secondary, whatever it may be. They also called it SOS, so something after school. However, studies around Alaska show that students are not taking advantage of that next step, that post-secondary opportunities. And so I think studies have shown in other places outside of Fairbanks and in the state of Alaska that investing in and having a focus on bridging that gap between high school and that next step by implementing programs, providing initiatives, and creating a position that can guide and navigate families in those hard to navigate situations for the next steps, it has shown that there's an increase in students taking advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you. Comments from the board? Mr. Doran?
No, I've never at a loss for words, sorry. I'm very pleased to support this, and for several reasons, one of which is that it really affirms, I think, what our district strives to do, and we have many things in place for that. Some things that stand out for me is the partnerships we have, especially with UAF, our North Star College, and the Hutchinson Technology Center. That's a real partnership there. The partnerships we have with our local unions. It is truly impressive that we have high school graduates that are able to move directly into apprenticeships. And that prior to COVID, and I hope we'll get back to those, we actually were able to do signing ceremonies for those students with their families and union representatives there. The recently, last spring, I was able to attend some of the commitment ceremonies that students took part in at Hutch, where you had a CTE teacher speaking, you had somebody from the academic corps, and you had somebody from the trades or the field work for each of their concentrations. And students actually made a commitment for their areas. When you go to North Pole High and you look at their programs, et cetera, we have a lot of things that our district has done. And I think this, as I said, this affirms what we're doing, but it also encourages us as a district to continue to look at ways that we can support students and families post high school. So this resolution not only pushes us a little bit, but it pushes the state to provide those opportunities that our students have, but that we can do even more as we go forward. So I appreciate the resolution coming forward to us. And I believe it'll go on to AASB for consideration by all the districts in the state.
Correct. Mr. Sampson? I apologize. Did you raise your hand to speak earlier? Okay. Ms. Sanderson and then Ms. Smith.
No, I'm in favor of the resolution, Madam President. Having worked with students in the classroom, Northville High and other area schools, I think it's so beneficial when students, have these other options. And I think taking a hard look at how we present the platform for students and how we help them navigate their options out there, it's a win-win for all of us in the community, for our students, and for families. And recently at the graduation for West Valley a year or so ago, Ms. Gillum, she really started the ceremony off in a very unique way that I hadn't seen before. So as you acknowledged the student body of graduating seniors, she just said, I would like to have those stand who are pursuing the trades. And she just went on down through, which normally we say these top students are getting X amount of money to go to X amount of colleges, but she just did it in a reverse kind of fashion. And it was so inclusive because military, Job Corps, all the ways that our students are pursuing their career paths and their life, their plans for their goals. It was so rewarding to hear that and to see that validated by one of our principals. So I just think it's a good partnership, and as we continue to build on it and expand on it, it's going to be a win for our district, our students, and our family. And thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
For clarification, was the board notified that this was a resolution to be considered to be put forward to AASB for their conference? I don't really see that anywhere. Is that what we're doing? I just want to be clear.
It was AASB asked if any of the districts would like to go ahead and push or bring a resolution forward. And this was one that was given by board members to be brought to AASB.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation because I did not see that anywhere in this document, or I had no understanding whatsoever, and I carefully read the documents, that this was to be put forward to AASB. So that affects my decision, and then I do have a question
Go ahead.
for the people who are making this. So through the chair, Ms. Marati, if you're the one that wrote this, may I ask her? Thank you. This is creating comprehensive support for families. So is this resolution resolving to create a position? Is that what we're asking the state to do?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think that that's up to the district. So what this is asking is for the state to provide support, whether that's monetary or guidance framework, that can then trickle down to the district to determine what they can do that fits the district's needs. So local control, but support from the state. But to follow up, other districts have created a position. Yes.
Any further comments or questions? Mr. Doran?
Thank you, President Luke. One of the things I like about this is that it really is not specifically asking for any positions. It is asking the state to keep this whole career development path in mind. And I think it's complementary to a push that was actually made about 20 years ago to really get the state on board to help support Voc Tech. It had been kind of put on a back burner through the 90s and such. And I know all the principals associations and superintendents association and had resolutions at that time that helped the state bring that in. I think this, to me, is part of that. And as I said, why I like it is it affirms what we're doing. And it strikes me as well that it's complementary to, and I don't know all the detail, but it came to my attention just recently, they had an open house, our own center for student support and family engagement that I don't know that they're, how married they are to each other, but that they're complementary to each other for sure. And so this on our part right now is not saying that we're committing to do anything further staffing wise, but it is calling to the state to help support this. And I see it as an advocacy point for us later down the line and just supporting funding for public education, because regular classroom is what helps to lead this also. So so that's how I kind of see it in that big picture, and leads to my support of it for that.
Ms. Sanderson?
Yes, I could support it. I would appreciate it, piggybacking on Ms. Smith's comment, that if out of our training, if there's something that was going to come out of it, that we could have worked on it to all of us together, or it be brought before the board. It's great. It's good work. It's good brainstorming. But that, and I know you couldn't have talked to all of us because that would have been a violation, but you could maybe talk to one more of us. So if this was going to be working, that we were going to bring before the board. So I would just appreciate that going forward. So.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, can we get the vote, please?
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson?
Yes.
Ms. Marati?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Sampson,
Yes.
Mrs. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Mrs. Luke.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next, we have information and reports, school climate survey report. Goal and objective is to ensure students, staff, families, and community are informed, connected, and engaged with the district. Dr. Ellis Ott, Senior Research Analyst, will provide an overview of the 2022 school climate survey. Dr. Ott.
Thank you. In a moment here, I'll get on the, take over the screen for the Zoom. Okay. Good, we are. Okay, we're up and going. So thank you, board, for my opportunity to present the school climate from last school year, 21-22. And again, for the public, this is Ellis Ott. I am the Senior Research Analyst for the district. I'm basically the person that is behind a lot of the data that you see for district. This is just a reminder that in the district's strategic plan, there are core values of providing a safe learning environment and engaging with students and staff and community to support student success. And one of the strategic goals includes increasing social emotional well-being for all students. Okay, to that end, the American Institute of Research developed a suite of surveys for students in grades 5 through 12, parents and staff, in contract with the U.S. Department of Education to evaluate what I would say the core importance of this information that we collect every year. We've been doing it for about 6 years now, is student voice, parent voice, and staff voice. Beyond what we get from public comment or beyond what we get from emails and phone calls, trying to get more of a comprehensive view of how these different groups of individuals feel about their schools. Okay. So it's reliable. It's been nationally validated. This is a highly reputable organization, research organization that developed this, that we are using in our district. It only takes 10 to 20 minutes. It's not a lot of items. The basic structure of it is it's a positive statement for a school, and it asks the person completing the survey their level of agreement, which can range from strongly disagree to strongly agree. There's a few statements that are really negative statements, and so it just kind of flips its ear on, you'd want them to disagree with the negative statements. Okay. As I said, we've been running this for about 6 years now. Much like the state assessments and our local assessments, there's 3 kind of general results, and for the surveys, we're going to refer to these as domains. So it's just like in the assessment, we get a result for English, language, arts, and math. For the survey, we get results for engagement, safety, and environment. Okay. Now I'm going kind of quickly through this for the purpose of brevity. I believe that's the term, to kind of shorten this and try to keep it about 10 minutes. But at any moment, board members can have questions if they'd like to pause me for a moment. So engagement is basically the relationships between students and teachers and families in the schools. And topics within that include cultural and linguistic competence, school participation, etc. I'm not going to read every one of these, but these are just examples of the items in the survey that are specific to that domain. So I'll go ahead and read the one for students. It's a statement, teachers understand my problems. Okay. The next domain is safety. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a emotional, physical safety. It includes the idea of feeling a sense of belonging with the school. Okay. So emotional safety, physical safety, bullying are examples of topics within that domain. Okay, so I read one for students. Let's read one for parents. My child is safe at this school. Okay, that's the statement that they look at and they determine their agreement with that. Okay. The last domain is environment. Okay, do we have appropriate facilities, well-managed classrooms? Do we have a fair discipline policy? Okay, so the topics within that are physical and instructional environment, physical and mental health, and discipline. Okay. Let's do one for staff. Within environment, discipline is fair. Okay. Okay, benchmarks. What are these? This is American Institute of Research. I think we'd run the survey for a year already, and they ran a study to do something that's completely analogous to what we have with the state assessment. You have results, but you go a step further and you come up with an assessment, you come up with achievement levels, right? 4 different achievement levels. You have to do the very same thing analogously with the school climate survey. We have perception levels. And there's 4 of those. They range from very positive to very negative. And the way I would help folks kind of interpret that, that means that, let's say, for example, the result is the person is very positive in safety for their school. What that means is if you kind of give them a general positive statement about the school, in general, they're going to say, I strongly agree with that positive statement. Okay, that's kind of the way you interpret what it means that they're very positive about their school in that particular domain. So because of that, the results that I provide are very similar to what we provide for the assessments. You know, the assessments, we provide proficiency rates. For this, I provide positive rates. What's the proportion of students, staff, or students or staff specifically that are positive, very positive in a particular domain or topic? Okay. So what came with that on top of that is that they did that benchmark study, and so they had a group of school districts and states across the nation that had participated in that survey. So I can look at the results for that, the positive rates for that benchmark group. Okay, so there is a publicly available dashboard, and I'm going to exit out of here to kind of show that real quick. Let's see. So on the school district's website, oh, I got to move this out of here. On the right banner, there's a group of little tabs. There's one with a little person pointing to a graph, and that's the first link to follow to the data dashboards. Then we have a couple different ones, one on class size. We just had a discussion on class size. And the next you click on is the data dashboard. There we go. And so this data dashboard has lots of different data, and every year I'm working on expanding this. I've got a long list of 5 to 10 different additions that I'd like to add to this. But for right now, this is what we have there, including school climate. For each of those groups I talked about, students, staff, and parents. And the one I'm pulling up real quickly is just an example for students. And I try to make it as flexible as possible. You can pick a particular school you'd like to look at. You can look at a particular group of students across the entire district, or a group of students within a specific school, a specific grade level, race and ethnicity, English language. There's lots of different ways to review this data. You can review response rates. Those are the different tabs. Okay, and we can come back to that if we have more questions. And I'm going to go back to the current slide and kind of have a general overview of results. That the student response rate increased quite dramatically from 2021 to 21-22. My interpretation of that is that in the 2020-2021 school year, in the fall, we had remote learning for all students. And in the spring, we had in-person was optional, and is about 50-50, give or take, of students in-person versus remote learning. And in general, what we found is that the response rates were much higher if the students were in school at the time. And so that directly impacted the response rates for that particular year. Where 21-22, last year, we were in person the entire year. And so I believe that's what directly impacted those response rates for students. And the response rates went down a little bit for parents and staff, and it might be for kind of the opposite reason. Things didn't really change for parents in terms of they're not the ones going to school, so the way they respond to the survey is, you know, through an email link, or they're going to a website, and I'm providing a link on the district website, and they're clicking on it and accessing the survey. Okay. So in general, greater than 3/4, 75% positive rate for students and staff in all three domains. And you may notice when you look at the results that I don't have positive rates for parents. That's because the researcher organization found that the response rates were way too low for parents to be able to develop the benchmarks for parents. So I think the response rate in general is like 6%. So when we get 16% or 24%, that's well over what typical districts or typical states might get with that survey. Also providing grade point averages. That's where we just ask the student, the staff, or the parent, what grade would you give your school? A, B, C, D, F. And I've calculated averages. And what's interesting about this is that parents tend to grade their school higher than the staff, and the staff tend to grade the school higher than the students. Okay, and our positive rates tend to be above the benchmark. And when I say benchmark, I don't say national group, because they said that based on their little study, it wasn't exactly aligned perfectly with a national group. So they said don't refer it to a national group, refer it to like a benchmark group. Okay. Perception gaps, which is just like an achievement gap for demographic groups, tended to be small, if at all. I did find that African American student group had the lowest positive rate than other demographic groups for all three domains, even though the difference wasn't high. So that's basically me flagging that for further review to kind of assess how we might want to respond. And also look into it further. And you know, my recommendation to work on that every year. And this is just a link to the group that's working with the American Institute of Research, which helped develop all the domains and the topics and the items. Is this web address, Safe Supportive Learning? Okay. So I am ready for questions.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions? Okay, all the board has questions. So Ms. Marati, Ms. Matheson, Mr. Dorn, and Mr. Sampson. So Ms. Marati.
Thank you. Dr. I appreciate your hard work for our district. You should know that when I go to other districts, people comment that we are so lucky to have you in our district, and I always agree. So thank you for your service to our district. I am curious, two things. The first one is, I noticed that when in the results in the dashboard, we're able to filter it or sort it by gender, but there's only 2 genders listed, is that it's not very inclusive of actual reality. And I'm wondering if the district has any plans to make that more inclusive.
So that's been a question that's come to me before. And right now with when we're collecting data and with gender for staff and for students, our gender question is very strict, male or female. And I have said it would be disingenuous of me to change the way we do the school climate survey, but then everywhere else we do it completely differently. When we have staff come in and get hired and we collect information on them and we ask gender in a different fashion as well as students, and that it would be a larger scale decision such as with the administration and or the board to review that.
Thank you. Ms. Matheson?
Dr. Ott, thank you so much for presenting this. In your conclusion, you said that African American student group had the lowest positive rate than all other demographic groups for all 3 domains. So that's engagement, safety, and environment. What can we as a district do to change that?
I don't think that's something I could answer. I think it's more programmatic. Maybe I can turn to our administration to.
I think when students feel welcome and included and seen, they always feel a little bit better. And there's lots of ways that we can do that. It starts with their relationship with their teachers. We do a lot of work with SEL awareness for teachers so that they have a better way of approaching kids. It's kind of the work that we're always doing. I think there's lots of ideas on how to specifically improve that. It's going to come down to relationships.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
I was just going to check looking, did Mr. Minor want to say something from the secondary in response to that?
I would agree with what Kate said. I think the data is important to start those conversations, and obviously building relationships and having supportive programs in place for all of our students, and ensuring that specifically our African American students know that they're supported and loved, and that they've got safe places that they can go to talk with staff members and get the supports that they need. So, we're seeing this data alongside you, and we'll definitely dig into it, both from an elementary standpoint and a secondary standpoint, to see if we can improve upon those numbers.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer, but I'd like to just remind the board members, I know that Ms. Mullane is not here, but it's just important to go through the chair to ask a district employee a question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that reminder. And I've got 3 questions. If I could do my 2 quick ones, and you can put me back in the queue. Dr. Ott, on your slide 3, you talk about completion time, and then in parentheses, you have 47 to 83 items. What's that range? Is that by grade level or target areas, or it's a pretty broad one?
That's just the different groups. So there's a different number of items depending upon if you're a student, staff, or a parent. I believe the parent's the shorter one. Staff might have been the longer survey.
Okay, great, thanks.
So those 3 groups have different numbers of items.
Okay, great. Thank you. My other question was about the benchmarks and getting a little better feel when we say that some of our responses or groups are above the benchmark or below the benchmark. Is that benchmark the 2017, and is it percent of participants, or is it numbers of answers in each of the categories? I'm not sure what we're benchmarking.
So typically when someone comes to me and says, how do I kind of look at this data and review it, and basically the idea of working, I don't want to fixate on a single year. Maybe you want to look at it across a couple years. The other thing you need to think about is, what are you comparing yourself with, right? What's the way to assess where you're at, right? And so a school might compare with other schools in a similar set of grades, like elementary, middle, and high. But the district, what do? We typically might compare with the state and or what we call the Big 5, the other 4 largest school districts in the state. So Anchorage, Kenai, Matsu, Juneau. But the issue with that here is that those other districts are not doing this same survey. And so that's why I turned to this benchmark group that was run by the American Institute of Research, where they looked at all the different iterations of the survey being run across the nation in various districts and states. And so when I'm talking about benchmark, that's essentially me being cautious and not saying versus the nation, because they said we cannot defend that, saying it that way, because when you have results for like the measure of academic progress or local assessment, we have comparison results with the nation. But that's because that company says that they can defend it, that they've got enough data to look at the different demographics of all the students that took the assessment to then come up with a group that they could say this is comparable to the nation, quotes. And American Institute of Research said we can't do that with this particular survey, but you can call it a benchmark group. So that's what I'm referring to. So specifically when you're talking about numbers, I'm talking about the percentages of positive rate, positive, very positive from the benchmark group for students and staff. And so I'm doing a comparison with that to try and get a gauge of, well, how high is this? How low is this? So that's what I'm doing. And the staff in the benchmark results have, much higher results. They have like 95% for, I believe it's engagement, and 92% for the other two, give or take. So it's a higher level. And that might have to do with, I'd have to look at each and every item specifically, but I think in general, the idea is if you ask a staff member what they think of their school, they are evaluating themselves to a point. And so they might have a little more bias on the positive side when they're evaluating school climate versus a student. Because pretty much all the questions for a student is about what they observe in the school outside of them. And so that's why those benchmarks, I think, are much higher for the staff than they are for students.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really thorough answer. Mr. Sampson?
Thank you, Dr. Ott. Appreciate it every time you have a chance to come down here. Can you elaborate a little more on on your takeaways, lessons learned, areas of concern, shall we say? You highlighted a few. We've been doing it since 16, 17, you say, this particular data gathering. Were there any other stark takeaways that you saw? Of the three that were on there, you mentioned one of them had to do with African Americans and their perception. So I guess I've got two questions here. One is, what other takeaways did we have? And the one example of our African American students, families, staff members, I didn't catch the specifics there, but it seemed like there was some work we need to do there. Were those actual African Americans, or those just people that identify with African Americans, or were they really African Americans?
So for students, I'll try and make my answer short. For students, the survey is confidential. So we do some grant reporting for the school climate survey results, and so I need it to be confidential, and I can identify basically through the enrollment process. We ask families the race and ethnicity. So we ask first, are you Hispanic or not? And then we ask the set of races, and students can identify multiple races, and that's captured in here. And so when I say African American, it means that's what was reported to us. And similarly with staff. With staff, it's actually a question in the survey of, just the method that I just mentioned, and staff identify that. Other takeaways, I did notice that in 2021, and for the benefit of the public listening and the board, last year when I presented these results, I said be very cautious about this. That was the year where we had remote learning in fall semester. And so basically I said that students completed the survey in February. So the students that were in person weren't in person for very long. And so when we asked them some questions about what they feel about their school, they might approach that a little bit differently because they spent most of their time in that particular school year, not physically in school. And some of these questions are like, you know, how clean is the bathroom? How clean that might not be the specific question, but it's how clean are the facilities? That kind of. There's a few questions that I was concerned about how they might approach that, and I expected the differences to be there. So, and I would corroborate that here, where if you look at the positive rates, 2021 we went down from 2021, where 2021 was kind of a high year, and I think that is as a result of. The strongest word I could use is the fluke, but I think it's just it was impacted by that particular year, and I would say the way I interpret it as I'm positive about our general results in safety, engagement, and environment, but I do have concerns with the groups I referenced, like African American students. I would also say that with staff, because I saw similar, even larger differences between the positive rates between African American staff and non-African American staff. And given that, that's my recommended need to review further, which would be, you know, beyond my scope. That would be, you know, kind of a group kind of looking at it, because you can look even further than what I've referenced here. You could go, okay, here's the domain difference, but what about the specific topics? Is it bullying that's, you know, a larger difference, or is it this particular topic? And then you can even go into the questions. So it could be done with further work beyond what I presented here. So hopefully that helps kind of clarify.
Thank you. Ms. Marati, I had you next in the queue, but Ms. Sanderson was also in that list. Do you mind if she goes?
Thank you, Dr. Art, for your report. And I believe that your report is highlighting a deficit for our district in this area with African American students. Been on the board for 3 years, well, this will be my 4th. And every year there have been incidences or some infractions or some situation dealing with this demographic of our students. Just at the end of last year, I mentioned this in a previous board meeting, a young student was asked by her teacher, was that all her hair? Not acceptable. Just recently, a young African-American student achieved some athletic achievement and was told their hair had to be straightened. Not acceptable. So when your report flags these things, I believe it's dead on, and I believe we still have work that must be done. And so I have tried to encourage our listening community when there are situations that they run into with their students. They need to deal with it at school, with the teacher, with staff, and then if they don't feel that they really got listened to bring it to the board. Every time a student has come before this board, our board has really heartfelt listened and tried to impact the learning atmosphere for those students. I'm still hearing of a few things that are going on, and so it's just work that has to be done. And I just encourage people not to be disheartened, but to bring things before the district, because if you just take your student and homeschool or leave our state, and there are issues that we can work on as a district, as a community, which our community works hard to be inclusive and to value our members. It hurts our work because we can't, we can't be held accountable, we can't change, and we can't come up with a solution. And I know that we've done it in the past, and I would just like to encourage students in the listening audience that if you're having difficulty, first try to resolve that through your school. And if you don't feel that, every time a student has come before this board, we've listened and, tried to implement changes. So I believe your report is spot on, and it just says that there's still work that has to be done. But I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanderson. Mr. Marati?
I appreciate Ms. Matheson's questions about the racial equity identified through the data provided tonight. And I'd greatly appreciate a follow-up on that, as well as the lack of inclusivity, so we can hear what new ideas are going to be implemented to address this. And so that being said, I'll follow up with President Luke to see if that's something that she can gauge consensus on from the board, and then work with the administration on a future report, or even maybe a work session, so we can dive deeper into it. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Mr. Doran and then Ms. Matheson.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up and then a general question. So if I look at the students' response to the screen example you gave, it's like 92% positivity for engagement. When we're not benchmarking that to say, you know, the norm, the average is 88% or whatever, we're a little bit above that or not. This is just in terms of a group that what the benchmark refers to. Is that correct?
Right, right. And I've made some efforts to like put a little line in the dashboard that shows those little benchmarks, but I've been cautious about that because it's not a national group. And that is one thing that I would note, that when I was talking about African American versus non-African American students and the difference in the positive rates, all groups were well above the benchmark group. For example, the safety positive rate for the benchmark group was like 73%. And so that's another thing to think about, is like where we're at versus a comparison. But then again, we want to look at differences between groups.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, my last question, okay, was originally a question which somewhat complements some that were asked tonight, but what do you pull from the data to guide us in making improvements? But I'd like to switch that through the chair with a comment and a affirmation with some others, that when we get these, we get the global pictures, the summary, but that from the administration, perhaps going into more of the detail, as you mentioned, it's not your role to really say where we go with these things, but that with the administration, that at some point it come back to us how we're using this data to ascertain things we're already doing well, and I know many things are happening in schools to address these, but things that we can maybe step up a little bit, so through the chair to the administration that way.
Thank you. I've noted that. Ms. Matheson?
I just needed to say that I disagree that our Black children are not being heard. They are definitely not being heard. My son was called a monkey at school, and nothing really happened to this teacher. I took it to the diversity committee, I took it to the EEOC, and nothing happened. It took her months to apologize to my son. So of course, I don't believe that we are treating our children fairly, and we're not treating them as adults the way that we want them to be. So I totally see why our African American children don't have a positive view in our schools right now.
Thank you for your comments. Did we have any other board members that wanted to make a statement? Thank you, Dr. Ott, for your report. And let's see, I believe that is our last item. And we can go ahead, since it is nowhere near 9 p.m., go ahead and entertain board comments. And I just would like to remind the board members that board comments, while they don't have a time limit, should be respectful of the listening audience and the rest of the board. Thanks. Mr. Doran?
Thank you. Couple of things. One, to start out with a shout out to our staff and parents and kids. This month, the elementary races have been going on, various venues, And it is truly impressive. My visual right now is at Chainer Lakes, but also at Birch Hill and other venues, to really have, I think, 1,000 people. Very positive, a mix of staff, parents, children. It really speaks highly, I think, of our community and our schools, and the effort to pull those together. There's a lot of volunteer time to put those on. And I know we also have that with some of the high school sports, et cetera, when you go by and you hear the cheering coming out of a stadium. That's all part of our education. And when we talk about climate, school climate, I think it's really key to that. I also wanted to report that I was able to participate last week. The Department of Education Early Development had a stakeholders group working to respond to the draft regulations for the READS Act. It was 5 days, an hour each day. They did a really good job. I had been requested by AASB to represent their board and to represent AASB school board perspective, but great conversations that happened. I think Deed did a great job in trying to not just say these are the regulations, what's going to happen. It's really what are the impacts. And there was a good representation from around the state, teachers, principals, whatever, there's a larger thing. So I think that needs to be noted. And in relation to that, very pleased with other board members here. It's been noted, Ms. Marati, Ms. Smith, and Ms. Sanderson, we were able to attend the Fall Academy, Boardsmanship Academy, sponsored by AASB here in Fairbanks. 22 school districts, about 70 people. I know I walked away particularly pleased with the information that I got on the READS Act and the state assessment plan. It was informative, prompts some really good thinking and as we go forward, but it was important information to have. And I hope that we will be able to support board members, come up with that support for members to attend the annual conference as in November, which is again very important. It's been noted here tonight that and last night that we're a fairly young board in terms of years on the board, and that training becomes really important. So I hope we can do that. Quickly, otherwise, I wanted to just note that the National School Boards Association Pacific Region is having their regional meeting here in Fairbanks, October 6th to the 8th. And so that's pretty significant for them to come to Alaska. And it'd be nice to have them here. And then just a reminder to the public, as President Luke mentioned earlier in her report, we're getting into the superintendent search, that everybody be thinking about what qualities they would like to see in a superintendent and qualifications, but especially that qualities, as we go through, that'll be an important part of our conversation of what will help our district continue to move forward and that will be beneficial to our community. So thank you very much for the opportunity to make these comments.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
Thank you, Madam President. No further comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Sanderson?
Yes, thank you, Vice President Smith. I just wanted to say, give a shout out to all the schools that I was able to visit. Salcha Elementary School to meet their brand new principal. I always say about the Salcha students that those kiddos have stamina, and they have been some of our little top performers in skiing and cross-country skiing, and they are fierce little warriors. Also got the chance to visit Crawford Anderson and see how that's going out there, and students were very enthusiastic and it's just great. And then Ben Allison Junior High and Discovery Peak and Star of the North. So just really appreciative of the positive beginning that we have for our school. And as a member of the AASB board of directors, every year I have the opportunity to sit on the scholarship committee. It's really a passion. I really loved it. I didn't think I would like it as well, but I love it a lot. So I volunteered for it at least twice now. And part of what we do is we raise funds to be able to award $1,500 scholarships to about 15 students, to continuing college students. We try to at least do 2 for the trades, and then the rest are brand new graduating seniors across our state. So I would like to ask our listening audience, if you're an artisan and you have a beautiful quilt or some sort of beading, or every year there's a dynamic, fierce bidding between 2 items, and that's the smoked salmon and peach treats, which is truffle chocolates from berries all over Cordova. So I would solicit anything that you would like to add to our auction so that we can help to raise funds for these students. And it's for a great cause. So all students all across the state of Alaska, and I know at least one of our students at North Pole a few years ago was awarded one of those scholarships. So just keep that in mind. And if you have something, you can contact me or email me, and I would appreciate it and love to take that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
Thanks. I want to thank the board for passing the resolution tonight. I think it's a win for our students, for our families, and for our educators, and I really look forward to it traveling across the state through AASB. Tonight we heard that our African American student group had the lowest positive rate than all other demographic groups in engagement, safety, and environment. If one race stands out, it is our responsibility to provide adjustments to our system so that all students receive an excellent and equitable education. Ms. Matheson's comments tonight were heartbreaking and real, and I appreciate her using her voice for those that are being harmed. This is something that the Diversity Committee was working on last year, and I encourage the Diversity Committee to continue the work in diversity, equity, and inclusion and report back to the board their recommendations on what we can do to eliminate racial and all inequities. I want to thank the AASB for facilitating the Fall Boardsmanship Academy. This last weekend, we heard from Deed and other experts on what they are doing and how school boards can help in areas like educator recruitment and retention, as well as learning opportunities about board roles and responsibilities, workforce development, and other opportunities that students have post-high school. It was fascinating, the work that's being done, and it made me feel hopeful. I'm not aware of any progress or scheduling on our next parent engagement committee, but now that Ms. Luke has allowed the committees to continue temporarily, I'll follow up with admin and announce any updates at the next board meeting. And lastly, happy College Savings Month to everyone listening. Saving for college throughout our students' lifetime.
Thank you. I'd like to encourage our community, especially our listening community, to support after-school activities. Let's get out there and show our students that their interests are important. Tennis and football have about a month left. Wrestling and basketball should be starting soon. And the beginning of October, concert season starts. And Drama Club is full steam ahead. They're gonna have some pretty hilarious plays. So I just encourage everyone to support our students, not only in school, but after school as well.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the after-school activities. There's so many things going on right now, and then also that are about to start up. I also wanted to reiterate the Unified Champion School for North Pole. I know that North Pole has been working really hard these past few years to get recognized with the banner, and I really recommend coming to the ceremony on the 7th at 1. it's going to be great. I know they're planning big things for it. And I also heard that if you do the VIP room beforehand, I heard that ProStar, North Pole's ProStar program might be doing catering for that. So I'll be there. And then also a big shout out to our school's librarians. I know that they've been taking on some subbing. I think there was 3 classes in our library today at one time, which was crazy. There was so many kids in there. And they're doing an amazing job subbing in there. And also, creating a really good environment for just hanging out in there if you need to work on homework or you just need to talk someone to talk to. They're great. I love our librarians. So yeah, just a shout out to them. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And the colonels have not joined us, correct? Okay, thank you. For my closing comment, first of all, I'd like to publicly apologize to Ms. Hardy and Ms. Radowski. I also have charter school students and count them as not regular district students. But I stand corrected by Ms. Moline, and I'm always happy and ready to admit when I'm wrong. So I'd also like to say to the board and to the public that after our work session last night, I really did some reflection, and I'd like to say that I'm quite interested in the possibility of doing an internal search for a new superintendent, and then I'd really like to explore the possibility of a short application process and evaluation to see if we do have someone who's currently employed in our district who would be an acceptable applicant for the board. So I think that it would save us time and money and possibly be the best solution for our district. So I just hope that the rest of the board might consider that, and we'll see where that goes. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We're adjourned.